What keeps pastors from stepping away when it's time? For many, it's not a lack of calling or even a desire for the next season. It comes down to money. After decades of service, some leaders, they find themselves unable to afford retirement, and they're forced into this stalemate between their calling, their board, and their bank account. In this conversation today, I sit down with Gabe Pelphrey from Stewarded, who specializes in helping churches plan financially for healthy leadership transitions. And together, we talk about why so many pastors and leaders end up underprepared and how churches and ministries can take responsibility before it's too late, and the courageous conversations that boards need to have in all of this. So if you've ever wondered what happens when a church or a ministry avoids financial planning for its leaders, or how to prepare your own ministry for the future, then you're going to want to lean in. This isn't just about money. It's really how we talk about things like stewardship, legacy, and ensuring that both leaders and the ministries are positioned to thrive in their next season. Hey, well, welcome. This is the Life After Ministry podcast. My name is Matt Davis, and I'm here with Gabe Pelphrey. Gabe, welcome.
Good to be with you this morning.
Yeah. Hey, our paths crossed in the most unique of ways. We are tackling the same problem, but from two different places, and excited to be able to have this conversation and some future conversations that we'll get into. But really, the content of what we want to talk about is this idea of there are reasons why people in ministry, and namely pastors, are reluctant and don't want to step out of their role. And I'll say one of those is because they don't know where they're going or what's next. And so there's that kind of intangible piece of, what is my calling? What do I want to do long term? What am I going to do if I'm not preaching? And so there's some identity and some purpose kind of questions in there. But the other really big one is financially. And so you get to step into that space. You do step into that space. And I want to just talk about what is it that keeps us, what's the state of the church that you see today when it comes to financial planning for people in ministry?
Yeah, sure. It's a great question. The status that we normally see, unfortunately, for most churches is a lack of thought and a real lack of planning. I talk to attorneys, I talk to accountants, audit firms that work with the churches, ministries all the time. And, they say the same thing. Whenever it comes to transition and succession planning, there's a real lack of planning going on inside of the organization to what the succession transition plan looks like. And that can especially be true in the financial arena. I talked to an attorney not too long ago, and what they said really was, the transition succession plan they go in, these conversations that they have with churches, they're very hollow conversations, because the truth is the senior level pastor and the executive pastors can't really afford to retire from the organization. So they go in and they talk through all of these details of transition and succession planning, but the white elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, and sometimes maybe the board is not even overly aware of it, but the senior leaders of the organization cannot financially afford to give up the salary and move on to what they feel like God's called them to accomplish next. So it's a real problem. And most churches, if they would just start the planning process much easier, it's something that can easily be overcome.
Yeah, you get to this point of a stalemate, right? Like you have somebody who might want to leave and they're ready to move on, but they can't financially, or you have a board that is ready for them to do that, but then you have this hesitation because we didn't prepare them well. We're talking to people who are not making all that much money sometimes in some situations. And so what do you do about that? And, obviously, this is a retirement conversation. So there's retirement planning, and that is inherent in anybody's profession, right? You gotta, if you're waiting till you're 64 years old to say, I wonder what I should do for my retirement planning, you've been waiting too long. But even what do you see as who's responsible for this? Does the board have to take any role or responsibility in this? Or should this be something that the pastor, the leader should be thinking about on their own?
We really see that it happens one of two ways. And, quick answer to your question is yes, the board should be very engaged in this. And it's something that they should be monitoring on an annual basis. It should all be a part of a compensation review. Healthy organizations, they review compensation, certainly for, their key leaders on an annual basis. The churches should probably do it for all of their employees on an annual basis, but the board should really be involved for the senior pastor level and at the executive pastor level. Normally, working with our organization, it will either be initiated by the senior leader, the senior pastor, or one of the board members that is really over compensation. But what we say is what we're really doing is financial planning for the church. And we are trying to help the church forecast out, when they're going to want to make a transition. What does the pastor really need to be taken care of in retirement? And there's all sorts of things that are factored into it. Are they a founding pastor? Are they not a founding pastor? How long has their tenure at the organization been? Sadly, we see many churches with founding pastors or with pastors that have been in the organization for 20, 25, 30 years, and there's been no thought or any planning given to what does the financial future of that individual look like whenever either they're ready to have a succession plan initiated or the board is ready for a new generation to come in and really cast a new vision and lead the church in a different direction. It goes a lot easier if the financial planning for that has been done. Now, financial planning is one area that the church needs to plan for, but there are other areas that your organization is very good at helping churches, and ministries work through. But the financial piece of it, nobody in the church world, or I find a lot of times people in the church world, they don't want to talk about compensation. They don't want to talk about planning. They don't want to talk about money. But when you get to the end of it, it plays a critical role in a good transition to succession plan.
How many leaders, how many pastors are retiring themselves into poverty? And the prayer has just been, God's faithful. He's been faithful before. He's going to be faithful in the future. And they get to 65, 70, and they're still in the pulpit and they can't leave. Like, what does that scenario look like?
It's way more prevalent than you would think. It's prevalent at small churches. It's prevalent at large churches. So it's not a small church or small ministry or large church or large ministry issue. It's across the board. It's just a very difficult situation. I get calls from pastors or board members where the pastor is 63, 64, 65 years old. The thought process has always been, the church is going to take care of this, but there's been no actual thought or planning, going into it. There's been a lot of miscommunication between the board and the senior leaders of the organization. And then they're in a really, really tight spot because they've got 2 or 3 or 5 years to plan for something that they should have been setting aside resources for a 25 or 30 year period of time. And it would have been a whole lot less painful if they would just plan for it. But it's not, particular to just churches or ministries. A lot of people aren't good at doing planning. And, a lot of the times we'll go in and work with the 62-year-old pastor, but they've got the new leader that's coming in. And, after we get the senior level pastor taken care of, we show them, hey, if you plan for the new leader of the organization, it's going to take a whole lot less resources and really a whole lot less concern and thought process if you just start planning at a much, younger time frame and younger age.
So how is financial planning different than for the church and for ministry, the ministry world, from your typical kind of 401k, right? So I know there's divisions between 401ks and 403bs, but you're doing something that's unique and particularized to the church. What does that look like?
Yeah, so a lot of the churches that we'll go in and work with, they'll have a 403b plan. Churches should have a 403b9 plan. If you're a non-church ministry, you should have a just regular 403b plan set up. But they've got that established. Many of the times they're not fully utilizing it. But a lot of times when we go in, the pastor is later in their career. So we use a lot of strategies around rabbi trusts where the church will set up an irrevocable trust and they get around a lot of the contribution limits that are on 403b plans. They're very, very flexible tools where the church can establish a rabbi trust and then they can put a deferred compensation plan with it. And the deferred compensation plan has the ability to be customized where the money can come out to the pastor at the time frame that they want it. There's all sorts of ways to customize the plan around death and disability and voluntary termination of service, involuntary termination of service, normal retirement date. So it's a very, very flexible vehicle that churches can utilize to do the type of planning that we're talking about here, where they really make sure that the senior pastor, the executive pastors, or the leaders of the organization can really be taken care of at a level where they're not going to need to take into account financial concerns whenever they transition out of the organization.
So the plus side for the pastor is there's some security in knowing financially going forward that he's going to be provided for. How does this help the church?
It helps the church in having the peace of mind that the money's set aside, it's taken care of, but they can really write the rules, all right, in a very particular way inside of a rabbi trust and a deferred compensation plan, where you can put vesting restrictions on it. There's all kinds of things that you can do to make sure that it's not just additional compensation that the senior leader's getting. It's really being set aside for a tactical purpose of helping the organization during a transition or whenever there's a succession plan implemented to bring in a new leader. There's not going to be the financial concerns that there would be if the church didn't do any of the planning at all.
Yeah, and really good planning is just good stewardship, right? It's not an optional, maybe we should do it, maybe we shouldn't. It's really a mandate, right? If we're going to, if people are giving funds to your organization, that's their worship. That's an act of worship, and it's part of our responsibility as stewards in the organization to be able to care for the people who are part of that.
That's right, and it starts with having some, courageous conversations, both at the board level and the senior leader of the organization. I go and work with so many of these churches where it was started by a pastor. They weren't fairly compensated or compensated at all for the first 2 or 3 year period of time. And then for a 10 or 15 year period of time after that, there was no retirement plan put in place for them. So they've been, way undercompensated. And a lot of these leaders, because of their heart for the kingdom and for the church, they don't want to talk about they're way behind in their financial planning. So board members come and go, not all the time, but a lot of the time. And, new board members will come on. Well, they're not even aware that the pastor didn't get paid for a 2 or 3 year period of time, or that the retirement contributions are behind. So it really is about good management and good communication and putting systems and processes in place where it's reviewed on an annual basis. Are we paying fair compensation to our leaders? Are we planning for the future? Are we setting aside funds for that? It's about doing planning, having a courageous conversation, and being a good steward of, the funds that the Lord has provided to that nonprofit or to that church.
It's interesting you say a courageous conversation. And I'm curious for you, is courage what's missing in this conversation? Because I'm looking at this from every angle, right? For the pastor, most pastors, they don't want to be seen as money grubbing and always asking for more money, and so there's a fear there. There might even be a shame. There's definitely a scarcity mindset when it comes to that. I'm imagining from the board perspective that they're just kind of assuming that some of that stuff is there. Like a lot of times they're business people and they have their own 401k. It's all set. So they didn't know we don't have this all set up. So, but is it a courage question, or is it just we would have the conversation, we just don't know what to do about it? We don't know what the solutions or the answers are.
I think it could be a combination of all of those things. I think everything that you just alluded to is true. There is a mindset among even leaders and board members that, and they won't overtly say this, but we don't really think that they don't want to make it look like it's all about money. So they don't want to make it look like it's a money-driven organization. So it keeps them from having conversations that need to be had. And,
right.
Again, that's why I get back to the process, the procedures, the systems that you put in place to review this on an annual basis. And even taking a step further than that, it's the board and it's the leaders of the organization coming together and forming a compensation philosophy. All right. What philosophy are we going to use to come up with what the compensation, the retirement package, all of these things should look like, not only for the senior leaders, but all the way down throughout the organization? A lot of organizations that I go in and talk to, it is board members that have businesses. They do it inside their businesses every day. But I think they differentiate inside of their mind of the systems and processes they have for their business and think maybe it should be different inside of the church world, or it is different inside of the church world, when, really it's just healthy organizations. They have this communication lines open, and it's something that they do, on an annual basis to make sure that they're on track to achieve and to really steward what the Lord's given to the organization.
Yeah.
So I think a combination of everything that you just alluded to. It can be fear in some bases. It can be lack of communication. It can be strongholds around money or people's perception of money. Whether it's on the board side or on the pastor side, I think all of those different things, play into it. I will say a lot of times when I'm working with board members, sometimes I think the conversation gets a little irrational. And to me, that person just has a stronghold or a thought process around what they believe that compensation should look like inside of a nonprofit. I don't necessarily think it's a biblical based view a lot of the time, but they've just got a stronghold or a personal belief that, compensation and the way that money's utilized inside of a ministry should look way different than it does inside of a business world.
Yeah. It's hard. Like, I remember when I was a pastor, people, the feeling that we had that like our car could be nice, but not too nice. Right. And I remember one of the guys on our team, he was a pastor, and he had a car that just kept breaking all the time. And he told the story in one of his messages about the car broke again. And this, story and all that. As a result of that, both the best and worst thing that could have ever happened to him happened. Was a family in the church said, "Hey, we want to meet you down at the Lexus dealership," and bought his family like a $60,000, $70,000 Lexus, but not just a used, it was a brand new SUV, which was great for them and what their family needed. And at the same time, like, it now is this thing that he had to explain constantly. And so, that is the perception. It's the mindset of, we have to be poor in order to, be leading people. And I don't think that we should be, I'm not we should have the, $2,000 shoes and the jets to go to our speaking events for sure in the ministry world. And at the same time, I think we need to take care of our people well, because it creates other problems within the organization. One thing that go ahead.
No, and that's really what we're trying to, to address here, is making sure that there is a basic standard of living that the senior leader of the organization can sustain, throughout the end of their life. That's really what we're trying to plan for here. It's not, exotic lifestyles. I've never worked with a church leadership or board where I thought anything close to excessive compensation was going on. Right. Some are more aggressive in the area of compensation than others are, but most or virtually all of the leaders that I work with on a daily basis, they're just trying to be good stewards and do what God wants them to do with the funds that God's provided to the ministry. So I see it more on the poverty mindset than I do on, this extravagant lifestyle mindset. I think a lot of people, in today's world view the church and Christian nonprofits through. I really see that it's the other problem. It's a lack of planning, and it's the senior leaders are getting, to a much later stage of life without even having, the bare amount of savings and things put in place for their retirement. So I think the problem is on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah. When we first talked, you kept saying this word, and you've brought it up a couple times. You talk about a rabbi trust. And I think it bears a little bit of explanation. I was curious when I heard it for the first time, because I'm thinking, are you working for synagogues? And how does that set up? Are you doing this for rabbis, or is this a thing for pastors? What's the origin of that?
So it's actually an interesting story. A rabbi trust, and the term rabbi trust is used in churches. It's also used in the for-profit world. I mean, huge Fortune 500 companies have rabbi trust established for their senior level executives. The origin of the term was a synagogue set it up for the rabbi, and the IRS challenged the tax deferred treatment of the funds inside of the trust for the rabbi. And it was challenged by the IRS. And in the ruling, the judge referred to it as a rabbi trust. So that's how it got its name, but it's not, for rabbis or for, synagogues. It's for, any type of corporation, either for-profit or nonprofit corporations can utilize it. And it's a way of really setting aside funds that the organization still owns. So if a church sets up an irrevocable trust, those assets stay on the balance sheet of the organization. But the way the rabbi trust is really written, what I say is it gives the participant the key to get those funds at some future date through the deferred compensation plan. So it's a way of getting the funds secured where a change of heart, a future board member or future leader of the organization, they can't go back and get those funds that have been set aside in the rabbi trust and use it for, a new building campaign or to do another project with. Those funds are segregated out away from the other funds of the organization, and they're utilized specifically for the purpose of taking care of the senior leader or the senior leaders inside the organization.
Yeah. And when you look at that too, and one of the things that you get to do that I think is very interesting in the ministry world, there's lots of compensation studies. We're always asking the question, what should we be paying somebody? But we've had some experiences with some founders. They started something 30 years ago, pulled themselves up by their bootstraps, didn't take a paycheck for a while. And then years down the road, the organization started to see some success. They started to have some funding, but never really got to recoup retroactively what was there in the very beginning. And now they're finding themselves getting closer and closer to what retirement might look like. But you do something very interesting looking back and how that works to be able to fund the future. What does that look like?
Sure. Inside of the church world, you can do something called a retrospective comp study. And it is a compensation study that's not just, current compensation, what you should be paid, but it's what you should have been paid, going back in time for an extended period of time. You can go back in and claw back those funds where the pastor was underpaid. And, I'm dealing with a pastor right now that weren't paid anything. This pastor was a founder, wasn't paid anything for the first 3 years that the church was established. And he's now short on his retirement savings by a pretty large margin. So the organization wants to stay inside of reasonable compensation, which all ministries should strive to stay inside of reasonable compensation, but they want to go back and really be able to set aside some funds inside of a rabbi trust to make sure that the senior leader and the spouse are taken care of later in life. So we're doing a retrospective comp study where we're going back and we're establishing and showing that this leader should have been paid, should have had retirement contributions set aside in the past. And we're going to use that retrospective comp study to be able to fund a rabbi trust and make up the shortfall that they would have in retirement on the current planning trajectory that they're currently on. So it's a very powerful tool that churches can use to make sure that their senior leaders are taken care of during the retirement years.
When I was in high school, I worked at Subway as a sandwich artist. Do you think you can retroactively go back and get some funds? I think I was pretty significantly underpaid at that position.
Yeah, I don't know if Subway's going to go for a retrospective comp study for you, but I guess you could try, man. You could go back. For-profits would probably be less apt to do a retrospective comp study than churches for a senior leader that they need to make sure is taken care of financially.
Yeah. So how did you get into this? Are you a pastor that just got the boot and you had to figure out financially what you're going to do and you're going to save the rest of the world? Or what was the entrance into seeing like, oh, this is a need and I can actually help solve it?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. Whenever I was 25, I got hired by a consulting firm that did this same type of work, but strictly with banks. So I started doing consulting for banks all over the country, helping them really retain their key talent. Inside of banks, a lot of the processing systems, the underlying technology solutions that banks use, they're almost identical from bank to bank. So really, banking is about recruiting, retaining, and retiring your best people. So I would go in and help these banks come up with compensation structures that were deferred compensation plans, similar to what I'm doing for churches and nonprofits now. So I started working inside the banking world and the credit union world. And my father-in-law was actually the elder of a really, really large church in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. I had never even thought about working with a church. But we were having lunch one day and he said, hey, we worked with another organization, inside of a rabbi trust and setting up some compensation plans for our senior leaders. And it was done wrong. It wasn't compliant with the laws and rules that the IRS has for these types of plans. Can you come in and help us correct that? And then we want to put some things in place for some other pastors at the organization. So I did that. And literally I started getting referred from, church and ministry to church and ministry. And just over a period of the last 10 to 15 years, have gotten a large amount of churches and Christian nonprofits as clients doing something similar to what I was doing inside of the banking world. I would have never thought that it was the need that it is inside of the church, but there's a huge need there for the type of planning that we're doing for these senior leaders. So that's how I got started in it and how I ended up where I am today.
And so your company is called Stewarded. Tell us, who are the people that you're reaching out to and you're serving?
At Stewarded, we started out specifically doing this deferred compensation rabbi trust. It was a real niche that we had inside of the church and Christian nonprofit world. We've expanded out to doing everything from health insurance, which we found to be another real struggle, especially that smaller churches and smaller ministries have. We've got a whole vertical inside of our organization that handles that now. And then we've got some very creative 403b9 plan solutions that a lot of churches are utilizing. So we're becoming kind of more of a full service to churches. But I would say in general, most people in the church world, the church marketplace, think of us more of the deferred comp and rabbi trust planning that we're doing for churches. And normally we're reaching out to the senior level leader of the organization, an executive pastor, a senior pastor. A lot of the times we get actually called by board members that have talked to a board member from one of our current clients that has the same, problem that our current client did before they engaged us. So, we work with the senior level executives and a lot of board members on the planning that we do.
An interesting thing was you reached out to us because you saw something with Ministry Transitions that you're solving, again, like what we said in the very beginning, you're solving one part of the equation. What was it that you're seeing, or what are you seeing even right now in the ministry church space that was missing? It's the other side that you really haven't seen, that you thought, man, we got to think about this more broad spectrum, more comprehensively.
Yeah, no, I got information on your organization. I was like, they're solving the same problem that we're solving, but they're serving in ways that we don't serve in. We're more of thinking through the financial planning and, doing all the financial calculations and coming up with the investment strategies and all those things. But that's one area of it, right? You got the whole other area of it, which me as a finance and investment guy, I say that you guys are a little bit more the touchy-feely, the soft side of it, which is very, very important, right? Because, the financial portion of it is very, very, very important. But I think whenever you talk about triggering a succession and a transition time period, this gets tied up in like the self-identity of the leader, right? What's next for them? What are they good at? What's God calling them to do with the rest of their life? All right. I'm not good at any of that. Okay. I mean, it's just, and I saw that you guys could be, a really great partner for a lot of my clients and a lot of the people that I'm out there talking to that are needing these types of things. There needs to be planning done on that. It needs to be thought through. The soft portions of what we're talking about needs to be handled in a classy way with honor. I mean, these people have dedicated a significant portion, or some of them almost their entire adult life, serving these congregations, serving these, people at the nonprofit. And how you make the transition is very, very important. How it's communicated. I don't really handle those things. And that's where I thought, man, if we combined, it could be, really powerful, and we could serve a lot of organizations in a very great way.
Yeah, I mean, no question the need is out there. So if you're looking more at the cold hard cash, then call Gabe. If you want soft touchy feely, you call us. Right? It's
But
pretty
listen,
fun.
the soft, touchy feely at a very, very high level, I can do a little bit. All right. But
Right.
I'm more the cold conversations of you need X amount of money in savings right now and you don't have it. And I would like to sit here and tell you that I think money can grow on trees, but
Right.
it normally doesn't. It comes through, planning and being a good steward and being faithful and making the right decisions. I'm better at those conversations than I am at, what do you see yourself doing next in life? I think you guys go through and really find out what their strengths and weaknesses are, how they're really gifted, all of those things. And that's great. And I see so many, leaders as they get really close to, leaving the organization. And listen, I saw this in the banking world, right? I would get these guys all ready for retirement. They would have large deferred compensation plans. But the truth is, a lot of their self-identity and who they had become was tied up in their banking career. And at the end of the day, they didn't want to give that up, and they didn't have any way of bringing somebody in to walk them through that. And that's where I really see you guys being a powerful source inside of the ministry world, is being able to come in and really coach those people through those tough transitions.
Yeah. What we're all looking for, what we hope for, is peace of mind, right? But I think whether it's your conversations or our conversations, the pathway to get there is honest, real, and sometimes difficult conversations. And we don't have to, pull all of the emotion. It's not always emotional. Sometimes it's like, well, what do you want to do? Right? How do you want to live? What does this next season look like? The change and the transition is not optional. It's coming, whether you like it or not. And so you can either be the master of your own destiny. You can say, I'm going to make some choices now that are going to ensure. And this is, we don't want to see people suffer, because it's not just you as the leader who suffers. You have a family, you have a spouse, right? And I believe that God has put you on earth to serve, and you don't have to retire, but you can say that next season or that last season before the Lord takes you home can still be a very fruitful and God-honoring season. And so whether that's on the financial side or a little bit more of the, where has God gifted you and put you? What have you learned over the course of your life that you can now employ and use and consult or teach or coach or whatever that looks like in the next season? Because I believe that you should be used by God until he says, I'm done with you. I'm going to take you back home. Right?
Yeah. And I think even in that area, a lot of it's fear-based too. So many of my clients that go on, they're very fearful at the end of the transition, what's going to happen in the next season. But when they get to the next season, it's better than they could have ever imagined. So they spend all this time back here kind of being fearful about the future. And then they get to it and they're like, hey, I'm loving it. I'm serving in different ways. I'm getting to utilize different giftings that I didn't even know that I had because I didn't use them, when I was the leader of the organization. So if it's planned right and they're coached through it the right way, I think it can be an amazing season of life for them.
Yeah. And that's why we call this thing life after ministry. And it is actually good. It can be great. It can be even better. And so that's the hope. Hey, we're partnering together. We're going to do something coming up, and we'll have the dates a little bit more specific on the back end as we close out this episode. But we're going to do a webinar together. Give me a little taste of what that might look like.
Yeah. So the webinar, we normally take an educational approach. And I think it's going to be very similar to the podcast of us kind of going back and forth and, you talking through what succession and transition looks like from the areas that you guys kind of specialize in. And then we're going to be doing the same thing and probably walk through a couple of examples where we give the people on the webinar some actual real life case studies of what we've done, the pros and cons to it, and really how it's helped ministries get ready and prepare to, go through a transition or a succession plan. And what I tell people is it's never too early to start planning for that. And the earlier you start planning from a financial standpoint and an emotional standpoint and a peace of mind, everything's going to go better if you've got a good plan and you're reviewing it on an annual basis to making sure that you're on track. So we're going to talk through all of those things, walk through some case studies, and just, talk through, how ministries can take these things and utilize them.
Yeah. So you'll be sharing some of your stuff. We'll be sharing some of our stuff. And then you get to come. And when I say you, I'm talking to those of you who are listening. you get to come and you can bring some questions. We'll have a little Q&A time and really just get some of these things as next steps, whatever you're looking at. Look, you might have just hired somebody into that senior role. This is a great time. Don't say, well, they just started, we think they're going to be here for another 20 years. That's a perfect time to start, right? We should be talking about our last day of ministry on our first day of ministry. And even if you're 5 years, 10 years, 15 years in, it's always a good time to do that. So stay tuned as we close out the podcast. We'll have more information and you can check the show notes and we'll have registration links and all the other fun stuff that you'll need there. Gabe, I've liked you from the very beginning and looking forward to doing more with you and serving the church in lots of really great ways. So thanks for being here on the podcast.
You bet, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to serving a lot of churches, a lot of ministries with you. So I'm excited about what the future has.
All right, man. Thanks. Hey, so this conversation with Gabe, it reminds us that too often leaders end up stuck because no one had the courage to plan. Retirement and succession, they're not just financial issues. We believe that there's stewardship issues that deserve our attention. If you are walking through transition, I encourage you, visit ministrytransitions.com and you'll find resources. You'll be able to donate to support leaders and you can book a absolutely confidential call. And we want to invite you, mark your calendar on Wednesday, October 22nd, 2025, 8:30 Pacific time, 11:30 Eastern. We are hosting a free webinar with Gabe and the team at Stewarded, and we're going to unpack financial and pastoral best practices when looking at succession. You can find the link in our show notes or go to ministrytransitions.com/stewarded. This is the time. Take the step now to prepare. The church and your ministry will be stronger because of it.